Hi, I'm Oliver Brown. You're joining me for Two Mugs on Wednesday, the 3rd of November. Thank you very much. And I'm here today with a little bit of a difference. Joining me is Eli Murray from our quality lab. He's our quality manager here at Condesa Co.Lab. As promised last week, I wanted Eli to come and talk to us about quality and the challenges of that during COVID. Eli, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome just to be chatting to you. I think even while you were talking then, just thinking the history of working alongside you, in the lab, cupping table, us being able to chat every day on quality. And it's a bit more challenging these days with you down in Adelaide, but, we make do.
Yeah, we make do. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. No, it's good though. I think it's made us work differently, think differently. And I think whilst it's always a challenge to deal with change, I think there have been some massive benefits coming from that too.
Yeah, definitely.
So before we get into quality, I just wanted to give an update on the market and where we're at today. Today, the C market's at 208.05. We're continuing to trade sideways. I'm not going to go too heavily into that because obviously it's not my area of expertise. I usually have the guests to discuss this, but what I do know is it's very interesting to see that the big warehouses in the US, they are seeing lowest stocks in 5 years. Similarly, in Japan, the JCA is also seeing some of the lowest stocks that it's seen in 5 years. And the European, warehouses are also starting to see significant decrease in the coffee stored. On top of that, yes, as we've mentioned many times, the weather has broken. Conditions are looking good in Brazil. But ultimately, if the producers are not selling, which is what they're doing, the prices are going to come down. On top of that, of course, we're seeing all of these challenges in supply and demand. We're seeing the gaps coming up. We're seeing added cost to shipping, to finance. All of this is causing the market to sort of stay in that channel, be above 200 cents. We're also seeing a new forecast coming out of Colombia, where they're hinting that there could be as much as a 12.5 million bag deficit from Colombia alone. And that's obviously going to have a massive impact. And that has ironically been caused by too much rain for Colombia. And I guess at that point, that's a good segue into quality. It's been very fascinating to sort of watch all of these challenges in Colombia from the point of view of the managing their stock, the challenges of dealing with COVID. But now with this rain, we're seeing some interesting patterns in the humidity levels in Colombia. And Eli, I think, from your perspective, I'll get you to start a bit about, general challenges that you've seen in COVID times. How do you manage your lab? But then I'll get you to dig further into, what does Colombia look like? What kind of things should you be looking at from an active moisture humidity perspective? So that's kind of what I want to talk a bit about today. And then also digging into how important those relationships that we have at Origin, how important they are and how you've sort of leveraged those to keep going business as usual in the Condesa lab.
Yeah. Many challenges to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So starting off, give us an insight. Like, what are the big changes that COVID has brought on in a quality lab as a quality manager? How have you worked with those? How have you got around those? And how have you maintained the ability to be approving and across quality over these last 2 years?
Well, I think anyone that's listening to this today can probably share in a similar, the challenges of just any roaster out there cupping coffee or cupping with their team or having a second opinion. That was pretty much wiped out, obviously, with COVID. It was so challenging. I think the first challenge I can think of is just getting used to the good old 2 spoons. Putting one spoon in, pouring it onto the other, sloping that way. I think everyone did it differently, but that was kind of the protocols that we set up at the beginning of the first wave of COVID in Australia. And so that was the first challenge. But I think as COVID really ramped up in Australia, we had to pretty much shut down our business from a physical aspect. So the office was shut down. And from a lab point of view, we could really only have one person in there. And that was just being safe, and also the law at the time. So for me, being the manager of, the lab, I had to generally be at home all the time, which was very challenging because working with my assistant, Keelan, it was all on him. And there's a lot of pressure. There's only one person in the lab to receive samples. That person needs to roast, that person needs to grade. They need to take all of the readings that we're always looking at, the moisture, water activity, bean density of coffee, just looking at the spec, seeing if there's defects in there visually. And then, of course, when you're tasting. So there's a lot of pressure on Keelan to get through those physical days because there's only one person there. And when it comes to the cupping, because I'm kind of the one obviously making all of the quality decisions and making sure the coffees are where they should be, what we would have to do is Keelan would set up a cupping for me. He would have to leave the lab. Sometimes I would cup, most often in the afternoons, sometimes into the evenings, just to get through a busy day's work. So I would get in there, cup the coffee, and it would be like a race, really, just trying to get through it, particularly as, when you're doing a large table. Just the simplicity of, pouring water, making sure everything's done in time, everything's weighed properly. It's all those little attention, to details becomes even more challenging when you're just by yourself. You're a one-man band, so to speak.
It's interesting. I remember in the good old union days when I was working there, and you had that pressure of getting through, the production race of the day, and sometimes that'd be like 60 coffees. I remember then, because that time pressure was on. Sometimes when you had the time, you had this wonderful opportunity to, have the discussion, with the coffee. You could really get in there and sort of, think about the flavor profile and really be comfortable with where this coffee sat. Did you find that having that pressure, 30, 40 coffees a time, you kind of stopped being able to have that headspace to really get into the quality, or were you able to keep doing that?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think the challenge working as an importer, it's slightly different to, the roasters out there, where, our job is just looking at the quality of coffee, obviously, but just seeing basically, how transparent that coffee is, or is there defects. We're kind of looking for the worst things about a coffee. That's our job, looking at the health of it. So I think when the challenge of cupping through a huge table by yourself, you've kind of got to become the machine, so to speak. And I think that's, any good cupper is like that. You have to be super analytical. You have to kind of detach yourself from maybe the emotional input, which is, I love this coffee or I don't like this coffee. That you can't kind of approach a cupping table like that when you're cupping through that much coffee.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what I became, and became the machine, so to speak. I had to just get through tables, looking for any issues. Is this coffee in spec? Often we're bringing in a lot of high commercial blenders. What's the expectations? Is it fitting that expectation? Is there anything wrong with this coffee? Is there anything we should be worried about? And then just moving on, and just kind of, I think when you're cupping a large table, you really have to be very systematic with your approach.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think were some of the big changes you made and you have had to make and you are making regarding sort of the pre-shipment approval process? Has that changed at all? If so, how's that changed from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think the traditional way of, we would purchase coffee, so we would go to a farmer or an exporter and look for those qualities. We would say, great, can you send us an offer or a type sample, and offer those samples, as are they're not milled yet. So maybe just a hand milled sample, just to look at the quality. And we would cup that, say, great, this tastes really good. Let's get a pre-shipment sample, so that sample obviously is milled, and then sent to us so we can see what it looks like as it's cleaned up. It's been hand sorted. It's, it should be at the right kind of moisture levels. Water activity should be safe. Looking at all that, then we'd sign off on that. Then coffee would be sent. Sometimes we get that shipment sample before they'd send it from the port, and then cupping the arrival sample. And that timeline, I think that's one thing that's been so challenging this throughout the whole time of COVID, because I guess there's many things to talk about here, but just from that quality point of view, we'd have to start shifting our perspective of, we're not going to be able to, look at a pre-shipment sample in time, because we're always racing to try and get those shipping, scheduled shipping appointments, trying to get containers down to the port, get them on the water. That's been such a challenge for so many reasons. It's not been just COVID. It's been weather systems. It's been, as you know, there's been a lot of strikes around the world in different countries. It's been manic, and I think everyone's really feeling that pressure. So,
yeah, I think, like, did you find sort of Origin have stepped up, in that space? I mean, I suspect they've always been there, but I guess it's that trust that you then been able to instill. You've made a leap of faith, and they've got this. They're as much pros as we are.
Exactly, and I think there's probably quite a few Origins in the last year or two that we've really put that trust into. And that's exactly what I was going to kind of lead on to, which is we're now obviously talking to exporters and groups of farmers that are actually really great cuppers. They know their quality really well. A lot of them are already certified Q graders or have different qualifications. And when you've been working year in, year out with these people, you get to a point, and with all the challenges that we're faced with COVID, say, you know what, can you cut these coffees for us? Can you send us your scores? Can you show us the green specs? What's the moisture look like? What's the water activity look like? And from there, putting that trust in them, it really kind of strengthens that relationship. And I think that's big picture thinking. We're always talking about, that relationship across the coffee chain, across the industry. And that really, this is the opportunity to put that trust back into the people you're buying from, the farmers that you believe in, the coffees that you love. And that's been really positive out of many negatives, to go to our Origin partners and say, I think we can use Getu Bekle as a really good example, in the Ethiopian team. Like, Getu's a fantastic cupper, and he's got such a great knowledge of his own country and the coffees that grow there. And saying to Getu, great, cut these coffees for us, show us those, the health of the coffee. If it all looks good, awesome, let's get that coffee, milled and get it onto the water. Because, as we all know, it's been such a challenge just to get coffee into Australia at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And even once you've got it on the water, there's no guarantee that it's going to be plain sailing from there.
Yeah.
Which leads nicely into my next question, which is sort of, the role that humidity, the humidity level, the active moisture, and bean density are playing. I know we've always been keen on those facts and figures. I know that's something you always take recordings of when the copies arrive and these pre-ships. But give us your insight into how important that's been for you, particularly from some of the more challenging origins, like Colombia. What have we seen, in that space, and Ethiopia and Brazil? Give us some sort of insight into why that's more important than ever.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at historicals, looking at any country, there's kind of, as you know, there's rough expectations on what moisture or water activity should be from certain places and regions, and depending on the process as well. So, Brazil's a good example where we always see quite low moisture and really safe water activity levels, often down the low, mid 9% for moisture, and water activities are often like high 4s or low 5s. And those numbers are almost expected year in, year out. So that's a perfect example right there. If we're going to get a Brazilian all of a sudden that's at 12% moisture or above, like that's for Brazil, that's insanely high. That's very worrying. So, if you're a roaster and you're getting a sample and you're looking at that kind of quality, you're excited by it, but you can see how high the moisture is, then that's a really good telltale sign that maybe something's not right. Now, saying that, it's not always like, okay, let's reject the coffee. You kind of need to dig into that further and say, oh, okay, this is a hand-milled, sample we've just gotten. It's super fresh. Or as we know in Brazil, there's certain regions of Brazil that the harvest is late, like Espírito Santo, places like that. So those things need to be considered. So saying that with Brazil, that's been fine. But talking of Colombia, I think that's been probably the biggest challenge this year. As you mentioned earlier, it's been raining so much over there. And when you couple that much rain and moisture continually with the delays and lack of shipping containers, just getting coffee to the port, delays at port, it's wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
So having those figures really helps us to see where we're at with the health of that coffee. Because generally this year, Colombia has been higher in moisture and in its water activities. Nothing unsafe, but it's kind of expected with Mother Nature. It's just, as we know, coffee, I think anyone being a roaster or a lover of coffee, it's like you have this preset kind of cupping profile or taste that, oh, I remember this coffee last year. I love this coffee. It tasted like strawberry jam and, a milkshake. And next year when I get it, it's going to taste exactly the same. And unfortunately, as you know, that's not the case. Coffee is a living, breathing, it's a plant, it's a bean. There's so many variables. I think that's why we all love and also equally get frustrated at coffee because it's never the same. And I think sometimes I do say that it is like coffee is a miracle, a miracle kind of thing that each year we can get coffee out of so many different countries that grow it with so many different challenges and that can arrive here and it can taste really good. I think we should all be thankful for that. But looking at Colombia this year, it's been so challenging for the farmers as well as the exporters, as well as the shipping places. That's been super challenging. So to tie all that in, it's great that when we're looking at the health of a coffee, looking at moisture and water activity of something, we can say, okay, this is at safe levels. This is going to be okay. Or, okay, wow, this is super high. Wow, what's the issue? So where's it gone wrong?
Yeah, if you are a roaster that gets a coffee with a super high water activity and humidity, I mean, from my perspective, I'm always like, look, often a higher water activity suggests, we've often seen it. We've seen it in Ethiopia, that great quality. You often get more florals, more jam, more fruit. But then, of course, the shelf life is that much more unstable. So my advice is always, use the coffee as soon as you can. What would you be saying to roasters, when they're getting these challenging coffees? What would you suggest they do?
I think it's a really good point. And I think my message would be to roasters, like the more you can be organized, the more you can be pre-planning, the more you can be putting thought into just looking at data, I guess, looking at the volume that roasters are roasting week in, week out, and they're kind of steady customers, and making sure that whatever coffees they've got, they're going to use it in ample time, and then be moving on to something that ideally is fresh. As you know, everything's, it's seasonal with coffee and each country is a bit different. So putting that homework in and doing some pre-planning is super important right now. Because I think, as you said, some coffees can arrive and they can be quite high on those levels, but still tasting fresh, still tasting really good. But it's a coffee that you go, okay, I need to use this now, or it's really only got, a 3-month, 6-month shelf life, and then it's really going to taste flat or baggy or fall off a cliff.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's not the worst idea. Only doing 6-month tranches, because quite frankly, you don't, in this kind of market, you don't want to be buying for like a year ahead. You want to be buying these sort of, smaller amounts.
Yeah.
Use it, move on to another one. Use it, move on to another one. So I get it. That does work quite well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Now, another thing I want to talk to you about, and I know, you've got a couple of blogs I think coming up. Read the roast. How much of an impact has that had on your ability to keep on top of stuff during COVID? Give us a bit of an explanation of what the roast is, to start off with, and then how's that benefited as well? Because I know you've had some really big positive impacts.
Yeah, big time. I think so with the roost, and obviously you're saying that in a funny accent because I think we're both trying to pronounce it properly, but it is from Norway. There's a great team over there, and I think the roost has been, on the commercial market for a few years now. It's starting to really gain popularity, and I think you yourself were the one that was kind of looking at these a year or two ago, and we were discussing it. So for people that are listening, basically a roost is, it's everything that you want in a roaster. It's a traditional barrel roaster, so it still spins and behaves like probably what a lot of people that are still roasting on production roasters are doing. But it's also a hybrid roaster, so it has, it's a barrel, but also it's hot air, so it's a convection kind of roaster as well. But it's a mixture of both those two things, but many more things. So basically, it has that first crack automated detection technology. So basically, once first crack starts hitting, you can already have your timer ready to go for how much development you want on that coffee. It's got an amazing online library, and this is also links up into the web, so everyone is sharing profiles. It's really easy to look at information, and it looks at a lot of variables when you're roasting, which is super exciting. So as we're only roasting small samples, but it's exciting to be able to translate that information to a roaster and their production roast. Because in the past, when we were roasting, we are only looking at a couple of things, but now we can be talking about drum speeds, the air temperatures, bean temperatures, all of these different things. So the roast has been amazing because you can roast on it as a manual process, but it's fully automated as well. And I think that's the main thing that we can talk about today, which is buying these. We have 3 of them, 3 units. So in a way, it's like you're roasting on 3 barrels at once. But it's got that full automation capability. So that's the exciting part. Once we've roasted a sample and we've tasted it on the coffee table and said, it tastes really good, we can go back to the profile and say, okay, let's lock that in. Let's name it. Let's say it's a nano lot from our friend Louise at Capricornio. Great. We really love this. We'll save that profile and use it again for those coffees. And so once you've set that up, then that's the game changer, basically. We can, a Keelan that's in the lab can be grading a coffee or taking some emails or receiving some samples whilst he's roasting. And so it's almost like you're hiring, getting one of these units in. It's like you're hiring a roaster, a physical person to be there all day. As you know, that we were always roasting on traditional, drum roasters in the past, and you literally are stuck to that unit all day. If you're roasting, you've got to be present. You can't. You can run away for 5-10 seconds and grab something or do that, but you really are chained to the roaster. And I think that's the game changer for us now, that these machines are making that automation process such an amazing workflow difference for us. And that ties in with COVID. When you don't have anyone but one person in the lab, that person could be doing multiple things at multiple times, which is amazing.
Yeah, huge game changer.
Yeah,
awesome. Without naming names, there are other automated roasters that you can buy. Why is this one like? Obviously, there's a lot more involvement, but like, what really steps this apart from the comp? Because I know we've used a number of them in the past, and I know one reason is lots of other importers actually also have them. So like, it allows you to as a roaster, everyone's got a pretty good basis to work from. But what sets it apart from the others that are on the market?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it depends exactly what you're saying. It depends what your job is. Like, as an importer, we're just looking at samples, and we just want to have a clean, transparent roast so we can see what the coffee is. The end goal for us is not to get the perfect roast to make that coffee. sing and make it taste so good. And that's the roaster's job.
Yeah.
So for us, having something that is like this hybrid, it's also got the flexibility of dose size. So you can do 50 grams, 100 grams, 120 grams max, which is really exciting for us. So as you know, the challenge when sometimes you get a sample from a farmer, they've only managed to send you like 100 grams or maybe less, or maybe it's more, but you've got to work with what you can work with. So having that flexibility is amazing. But I think, that's the main thing. You've got to start considering, what do you want? And, for us, and thinking about my past quickly, like I was a barista and I was obsessed with looking at new technology and what was the best espresso machines, the best grinders, like, the waves of different technology that was coming out to help us improve that. And I think I do recall a lot of, pushback from people. Sometimes people were like, oh, everything's becoming automated. Like it's, people baristas are becoming robots. And it's like, well, actually, no, it's just improving to make a consistent, end result, a consistent, really good cup of coffee all day, every day. And it gives you the ability then to actually talk to people or, take an order from a customer. So tying that kind of thought processes with us now being an importer and roasting samples, having that automation is just changing the way that we can work and interact. It's giving us more time to be able to talk to customers or talk to each other and be able to do other things. So I think automation, it shouldn't be looked at as, it's ruining kind of, I guess, the mystery or the romance about coffee. You can still have that, but it's just, it's making our lives easier and hopefully making a bit more of a consistent.
You can focus on the coffee and not the machine making the coffee.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting thoughts. Thanks, Eli. Now we're coming up to time, I think. But before we go, I want you to just give us an idea of what you're excited about coming up. I know that your babies are on the water, heading to us now. So, of course, Burundi is going to be one of your highlights. But what other origins are you excited about?
Yeah. We'll first talk about Burundi because you've already mentioned that. I've been obviously very lucky at Condesa to be able to travel over there several times, work with our sister company, Supremo, based in Belgium, and they've been running an amazing project called the Okawa Project in Burundi. And I think, as you know, going to Origin is such an amazing experience for so many reasons. But one of the big takeaways for me is you really understand challenges. You really understand the mindset of farmers. You understand what they need over what you think they need. It's amazing. So being able to go to Origin, going to Burundi year in, year out, has totally given me an insight into what I call, I think I said it earlier, but Burundi coffee is the miracle coffee for me. It's a little landlocked country. It's, if you only have to Google their history politically, historicals there, the challenges they've faced. They've had a wild, very colorful history. So it is a miracle that you can get such amazing, delicious coffee out of that country, and that we're lucky enough to be a part of that project. And
I do believe we're at the earliest we've ever got our Burundis on the water.
Yeah, and so I think that's a really good point. Every year the challenge is how can we get coffee out of that country as fast as possible, because no matter how much planning you do, there's going to be challenges, and each year it's going to be different challenges. And I think that in itself is
important as well. Go on.
Pardon?
Explain why getting it out of Burundi quickly.
Well, I think that's almost like another hour conversation.
Come back to this.
Yeah, I think it really is. I think that the big challenges, though, is everything from weather, very old trees. They're not a country that is, it's a very poverty-stricken country. There's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of investment into coffee, even though it's its main crop outside of tea. There's just
why would I prune my tree because it's my biggest moneymaker? Why would I do that? Yeah, that mentality.
Yeah, so they're not giant estate. All of it's garden little plots from different farmers, and it's old trees, so low yielding. Coupled with that, the different changes each year with the coffee industry there, and that also ties into the political changes, and they're often very unstable. We won't talk about all that now because, like I said, we could talk about that for an hour.
Absolutely.
But then it's landlocked, so getting it out of the country as well is a super challenging experience. So very excited about those coffees because they're going to get here at the end of November. Very excited because we've been working with the same mills year in, year out, and just seeing the quality improve year after year after year. And I think that's the nicest experience working from my perspective is talking to roasters, and you bring up Burundi and they're like, oh, I've never really had very good Burundis, or isn't that just all earthy potato driven coffee? And the results are the exact opposite, like clean, transparent, very juicy, really different cup profiles from the one country. And now we're also getting honeys and naturals. And I think the naturals particularly I'm very excited about because they're so clean. They're not super funky, boozy coffees. They're really clean. They're kind of tea, they're floral, they're tropical. And often I've seen people cut them and say, oh, this is a great wash coffee. And you go, actually, it's a natural. So anyway, I could waffle on about Burundi for a long time.
We'll come back to Burundi when they arrive. We can do a deep dive.
Exactly. So I'm very excited about Burundi. I think the other one to mention how exciting has been Costa Rica again. I think each year Costa Rica just, it's like, I think like the flavor playground of the world with just how much wild, amazing, interesting coffees there is there. And I think particularly the processing and milling, I think a lot of the export partners and farmers we're working with there have such a really good solid foundation on agronomy, on processing. So coffees there are super clean, but really interesting. There's a lot of playing around with different hybrids, as well as different processes. So Costa Rica's blown me away again this year. And working with obviously several different exporters and different farmers there. That's been amazing.
What do you the Mexicans as well from like I know some of those processes, like the hydro naturals, the citrus sweetness, like what, like, and I know they're quite like off the wall, different. Like what's your view as sort of head of quality on those?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think also this is something we could talk about for an hour, and I think that's those experimental processes, different fermentation processes, different additions of different yeasts, all that. It's been around for quite some time, and I think sometimes coffees hit the mark, and the end result, it tastes amazing, and then I think sometimes, unfortunately, experiments naturally go wrong and they just don't taste that interesting, and or become quite one-dimensional. So yeah, I think, as you mentioned, the Mexicans and obviously the Santuario project, and seeing what can be, the possibilities with Mexican coffees, super exciting. And I think that's a big picture thing right now. I'm very excited about origins that probably haven't always been, the prize winning, super exciting origins that everyone's talking about at a barista competition, roaster level. It's about countries that have potential. It's about countries that are going from strength to strength, and then hopefully over time it'll change the minds of roasters that have always gone, I only like these 4 or 5 different origins, because obviously they're great coffees, they're safe coffees to work with. But I think it's super exciting seeing places like Mexico, also one of our favorite origins, Papua New Guinea. So much potential there. Amazing coffees and different profiles as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Eli. I really appreciate your thoughts. On that note, I think we're over the 30-minute mark. I could have talked to you for hours on this subject and quality. Thank you very much for giving me your time, for joining the team. Very much appreciated.
Thanks, Ollie. I appreciate it too. Looking forward to doing this again soon.
Likewise. And of course, if you've got any comments you want to make or ask any questions, please do so. Please subscribe and keep on engaging. Thank you ever so much, everyone. Till next week. Bye.